Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Economy, Arts, Sports and Public Realm Policy and Accountability Committee. I'm still Councillor Rory Vaughan, the chair of the committee. And before we start, just a few housekeeping points. So first of all, the meeting's been live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. And so by participating, you are consenting to be recorded. If the fire alarm sounds either continuously or intermittently, I'll adjourn the meeting, and please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right. Officers will direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens. There are tea, coffee and biscuits available in the staff kitchen next to the reception, and the toilets are on my left-hand side. And you'll need a H&F security badge to get into the kitchen and other office areas. And finally, please can officers introduce themselves before speaking for the first time, and would everyone please use their microphones to ensure that it's properly recorded. So thank you and welcome again to tonight's meeting. Item 1 is apologies for absence, and I've received apologies from Councillor Liz Collins, Councillor Andrew Jones and Councillor Kayon. Are there any other apologies that we know of?
No, Chair.
From Zara Kayon. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. And item 3, minutes. Do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of February 2025 as an accurate record? Agreed. Agreed. That's agreed. So, moving straight on to our first substantive item, which is an update on the Cultural Compact. Now, I'm not sure exactly which order you want to do this in, but I first of all like to invite Haris Bakari, who is the fairly newly appointed chair of the Cultural Compact, to present the report, and he's going to be supported by Val Birchall, Assistant Director for Culture, Tourism and Sport. Mr. Bakari, thank you for coming tonight.
Firstly, thank you very much for your time today. I'm extremely excited to be appointed as independent chair for the Cultural Compact. I'd like to congratulate the work done so far by the council, particular Councillor Holder, who I'm very grateful to see here today, and all our local partners. There's over 80 partners we worked with who've given their time and energy on a voluntary basis to really make culture the heart of everything that the borough does. I'm, of course, very new to the role, but I'm extremely impressed to see the energy and drive from the Compact. As chair, my key focus from day one is ensuring that we maximise the return for taxpayers, and also ensure that we're focused on delivering the impact for residents. In terms of one of the key objectives as chair, I've ensured that we've had kind of some short-term deliverable kind of strands. They include cultural education for young people, destination campaigning, and inclusive mapping. In the medium to long term, we want Hammersmith and Fulham to be known for something nationally, and particularly within a particular cultural field, very similar to other boroughs within London. But this will require some more work and obviously determined in terms of how our short-term goals evolve in the next few years. Overall, this sector, like many, has been under-resourced for too long, and that's had a massive impact in terms of improving issues from anything from kind of employability within the borough to also social cohesion. This is an extremely exciting time for anyone in the borough who cares about culture and who cares about having a cultural impact to have a long-term lasting legacy for our residents. I'm going to pass over to Val Birchall now, obviously the Assistant Director for Culture, Tourism and Sport, who will present our work to date.
Thank you. So, yes, I'm Val Birchall, Assistant Director, Culture, Tourism and Sport. You can see on the slides here that Where Culture Connects is a cultural compact, which is part of a national network of compacts. And what is a compact? A compact is essentially a partnership of bodies wanting to see cultural development in a place. It's there to connect the arts sector, cultural sector, and other bodies in the local area, including the anchor institutions, private business, charitable and voluntary sectors. It's there to help to shape common priorities and extend the stakeholder reach to expand the capacity locally for delivery of a strategy. And so it's essentially there to deliver on the cultural strategy's theme of together. So we've talked previously at the committee about the importance of working with other partners to deliver the cultural objectives for the borough, and that's really the mechanism. And you can see on the map there, we're part of a national network of compacts, which is facilitated by Arts Council England, the DCMS body responsible for cultural development in the country. So this is the chronology of the compact being created. So we originally, as you'll be aware, we had the Arts Commission as part of the Residents' Commissions, and then we developed the cultural strategy. We bid for the London Borough of Culture. We established the cultural compact, and that was established by an invited membership. So Councillor Holder invited the original membership, and that membership is balanced for different interests, different art forms, different agendas. And we launched the compact at the first meeting of the Cultural Forum, which I'll come on to in a minute. And then we have the subgroups for the themes of the strategy, and they're focusing on delivery. Some are more developed than others. So the Destination Management Partnership was the first to be set up, and then we have a Cultural Education and Skills Partnership, and the Heritage Partnership is agreed to be established, but we don't yet have it up and running fully. So this shows the compact members as they currently are in the, if you like, the executive group. And just to mention that in addition to the compact members themselves, of course, those subgroups and partnerships that I talked about and the Cultural Forum, as Horace has alluded to, extend the range of those involved. So it's quite extensive. Now we have more than 80 organisations and individuals involved in helping to shape those different themes and delivery. And you can see, I'm sure you'll recognise the partners there that are significant in the borough. So clearly, since Cultural Compact and the Cultural Strategy were established, we've had the Refresh Upstream London strategy, and I just wanted to point out really the impact of culture and the work that the Compact is doing to connect to the industrial strategy, particularly in these themes of a distinctive cultural identity that is about our appeal as a place to live and work and invest and study. That we're about borough-wide programmes that develop creative skills. So that's the Cultural and Creative Education and Skills Partnership. That we're working with the local creative sector and local artists who are all part of the economy here, and how we can help to develop the impact, the economic impact, and the creative ecosystem, linking to some of the innovation agendas. And that we are activating the public spaces so that we're involving a lot of local talent and showing how we can energise the town centres and help to make Hammersmith and Fulham a vibrant place. So the forum is the open access group that includes anyone really who's interested in cultural development in the borough. That's residents and artists, cultural and heritage organisations, and the voluntary and hospitality sectors in particular. And it's there really to ensure continued communication with the wider sector about their needs and their work. And it helps to connect provision with communities and to involve residents more closely in shaping those activities. It's a regular space for supporting and building the capacity of culture locally, and the priorities are about an improved understanding of the local sector, so a greater awareness of what's already going on right across the borough, not just the flagships and perhaps some of the assets that people are more aware of, but the extent of cultural provision more broadly. And then trying to work on creating connections between those providers and communicating the cultural programmes, thinking about how local people in those areas can connect to the opportunities in the jobs market, and how we can make a richer life for young people. The Forums programme, because it's partly about building capacity, includes opportunities for those organisations to receive training. So some work around perhaps getting funding ready, or help with a marketing plan, those kinds of activities, but also some networking, because really a lot of creative work is triggered by collaboration and those kind of informal spaces. So, as I said, the first and the most highly developed of the partnerships is the Destination Management Partnership, and that was established quite early on. The purpose of that partnership is to think about how Hammersmith and Fulham can make the most out of its destination credentials. So, thinking about how culture plays a role in that strategic definition of place, and it relies on the 3 pillars of destination, which are effectively developing the right product for the market, promoting it effectively, and managing the place. And there's just some of the work that it's doing there on the slide, in particular the Countdown to Christmas campaign, which was the first thing, the first activity that it undertook, and which resulted in 20,000 extra visits to the borough, and was actually really drove footfall. And they're using that as a model for developing the next stage of their campaigns, because I think it really proved that by working more closely together, you could actually have much more of an impact. So that the Destination Management Partnership actually meets tomorrow at the William Morris Museum. Cultural and creative education and skills. Again, this is an early piece of work where the partnership wanted to do something practical to show that what could be achieved. So the first project we've got underway is Children's Culture Week, which will be taking place in the summer term. And that will be across primary schools in the borough and involves the Lyric, Amici, Dance West, Idea Project Design, Lambda, Olympia, Turtle Key Arts, White City Theatre Project. And that's about providing free activities for children in Year 5 in borough schools as a kind of focus to show what the cultural sector coming together could achieve in the way of delivery. And then the other projects there are about mapping how creative education links to the skills and innovation agenda, and then starting to work with some of the HE partners and schools and adult learning around that. So yet to get really up and running is the Heritage Partnership. That's going to look at inclusive heritage and will be the oversight for the Black History Museum project, and also in time pick up responsibility for Heritage Open Days, for the Blue Plaques process, and the prioritisation of local bids to National Lottery Heritage Fund. And we'll be starting to work on a heritage plan for the borough, and that will include local history societies, our own services for parks, archives and planning conservation, the Bavan, the Irish Centre, and well, effectively a lot of voluntary organisations that have an interest in local identity and history. So coming on to our future plans for the compact, I've talked a little bit about the capacity building programme. It's really important that we grow the capacity and the local market for culture, and that we provide work for local artists and ways in which those local organisations can become even more impactful. The destination campaigns, so we're doing a year-round campaign, and we'll also be doing a campaign focused on summer in the borough, and then another one to lead into next Christmas. We are looking at how we can instigate a youth culture festival, perhaps for next year. We're thinking about picking up a requirement of the cultural strategy to develop a civic innovation unit. So that's where artists and public policy and higher education research can work together to look at different ways of solving social issues. We've started work thinking about a pay it forward project. So that's where at the moment we offer a lot of activities in the borough, which are probably some people would pay more for, and some people are precluded from because they can't pay what it costs. So we're thinking about, is there a model in which those people who would pay more and would be happy to pay more could pay more, and that would help us to subsidise entrance for other people who are further away from that opportunity. And on the destination side, looking at wayfinding and welcome in particular. And then the final project that is coming soon is the cultural infrastructure map, which will look at how we can map using the GIS technology. We map our existing infrastructure, but also we look at what the activities are and what the providers are and how we can make those providers more visible. And it's building on some good practice, including the GLA's cultural infrastructure map. And that was something that was asked for by the Cultural Forum. So the final slide is probably a little bit difficult to read, but it's in the papers, is just a sort of an image of how that all fits together under the compact itself, supported by council officers, but led by the sector, and obviously chaired by Harris. So that is the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Val. And can I just please share that it's been an absolute privilege to work with Val and Thomas since my appointment. You really see the depth and the understanding of the culture sector when Val gives that kind of type of presentation. So thank you very much for Val and Thomas. I want to conclude by stressing to the committee the important role of culture in supporting the upstream industrial strategy. Positioning Hammersmith and Fulham as a leading borough for innovation and inclusive growth will be strengthened by improving the cultural and creative infrastructure, as this obviously helps to draw and retain the talent, create investment, but also obviously increase more visitors to the borough. While a vibrant quality of life is vital to the reputation of the borough, innovation is rooted in the creativity of education, career pathways, and cultural enterprise. So what I want the committee to be assured about, which is very important, is hopefully see that through the presentation that you've seen the delivery of the cultural strategy as a central part of the upstream mission. And obviously we welcome any kind of questions that the committee can bring forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much both for an excellent presentation. And I think there's plenty for us to ask you a few questions about and pull out some of the themes. So can I ask Councillor Patel to start things off? I think you've got some questions.
Thank you, Chair. I note that the compact was launched at a meeting of the Cultural Forum hosted at the Hammersmith Theatre, and that apparently there were 80 borough-wide stakeholders who attended. In my view, culture is a very difficult concept to actually describe. What may be culture to one person may be something different to another. It's very much a subjective issue as opposed to an objective issue. Is there any written definition of exactly what you meant by culture at that meeting?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Can I respond? Right. So a very difficult question, because I think lots of better brains have been thinking about that for years, how to define it. We have taken the definition that we used in the cultural strategy, which is primarily about arts and culture. So we're not covering food, for example, or sport, but we are covering heritage and softer forms of culture and community culture, as well as professional culture. So that's what those are the stakeholders that were invited, essentially people who are working in professional or voluntary sector, arts, culture, heritage. So that could be visual arts or performing arts or combined arts. It could be film and media. It's that range of traditional cultural subjects.
Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
I think that's very useful information. Thank you very much. But I think some sort of written definition would be useful, so at least people can address what is meant by that. Just as a parting interest, at paragraph 14, I note that the Destination Management Partnership had a campaign to promote Christmas in Hammersmith and Fulham. What exactly was that?
So the campaign was it was called Countdown to Christmas, and it essentially was a campaign for organisations that had activity running or hospitality businesses that wanted to get involved to use the Countdown to Christmas branding, and to encourage people through the competitions, online competitions and sign-ups to get involved in understanding what the offer was over Christmas, to join the mailing list and so on, so that the Destination Partnership now has a vehicle it can use to promote and to encourage people to come back. And 30% of the people that were part of that signed up were from outside the borough, so hopefully will mean that we'll get increased footfall from people who are visiting in the future.
Councillor Borland.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. I think I'm always impressed by the kind of the scope and the ambition of this project. Just to ask a bit further on the countdown to Christmas, I think obviously we should be running a campaign around Christmas, you know, definitely, but I don't fully understand how it fits in within the cultural definition. You know, obviously Christmas is culture, but not within the kind of arts and heritage that you just defined the scope of the compact. So, and we're planning to do that again for this Christmas. And obviously, I do think we should be doing some kind of under Christmas, some kind of campaign around that. I just wonder whether it fits in what you guys are doing. How do you see that?
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackie. If you don't mind, can I address Councillor Ashok's points? I'll come back to you. So I totally agree with your point about how culture can be very wide and diverse. It means lots of different things to lots of people. And I think one of the things that I've encountered as a chair is that there's very much an openness to the word culture to the committee. There are so many different diverse voices around the table, so many different diverse interpretations. So hopefully that gives assurance to the committee that we are thinking in that way. We're not a narrow-minded committee in that sense. But I do take a challenge about having a definition, and I think we have something written, but I think we can articulate it maybe in a stronger way, and we're happy to present that to you afterwards. In terms of, obviously, I'll let Val address Councillor Jackie's point about some of the issues, her views in regards to Christmas. But I've always said, look, the reality is, as I said in my opening statement, the culture sector is really under-resourced, like many different areas. And sometimes it's one of the greatest challenges finding resources to do anything for culture. People tend to put it right at the back of the line, sadly, with youth services as well. So when you can obviously kind of attach yourself to something which nationally is celebrated as Christmas, there's a logical thing to go for there. So while it might not necessarily define all the different aspects in terms of what an individual might say, this is the cultural thing we should be celebrating. Well, if we can actually do some good work in that period of time when everyone is focused on that particular area, and we can highlight why culture is important for Christmas, it's a win-win for the borough, it's a win-win for the residents. But I'll let Val kind of add to that point.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think the key thing really was to think about what is it that drives people to visit. And so I suppose in the sense that we have a strong Christmas offer on the cultural side. So we have the pantomime, the lyric, but we have lots of other things that go on over Christmas. And essentially the destination partners wanted to so they wanted to move from talking about doing some campaigns to doing a campaign, and it was a bit of a sense of, if we don't do Christmas this year, we won't, we'll have missed it until next year. And the focus on visitors has been quite interesting, because we've been doing a lot of research into what brings visitors here, and the main reason that people come somewhere is to enjoy the leisure activities that are on offer. So in that sense, the broad cultural offer was at the heart of the Christmas campaign. But because the destination partnership also includes the hospitality businesses and the hotels and the bids, it was also about come, enjoy the cultural offer, stay, spend. So you've got that kind of perfect offer. Yeah.
I completely understand you'd be kind of crazy not to take advantage of Christmas. And the only other thing I wanted to talk about particularly was I kind of love the idea of the infrastructure map. I think that's fantastic. We've got so much going on across this borough, whether it be from the voluntary sector or from the council. There is a lot going on. And I think that sometimes people struggle to know how to access and where to access and what is going on, And the only thing I would say is to make sure that we don't put all of our focus online. These days, everything is so online, and I am often online. But a lot of our residents aren't online. So trying to think about other ways to communicate, especially because, obviously it's often, say, maybe older people that aren't online, and they can be the most vulnerable and the most kind of in need probably of an activity, and often creativity is such a wonderful way for people to connect. So I would just say maybe we can make sure we don't just think about online, because it's easy to get kind of sucked into that. But thank you very much. I think it sounds really exciting.
Yeah, just to respond to that last point, I think is a really important one. So we are looking at different ways in which we can present the information. We've done quite a lot of work with the libraries, for example, with the trails that we've done, which are physical documents. We've also done things which are a bit easier to use to navigate. So we're thinking about how we can get round some of those ideas. We're also talking about potentially having a visitor information centre where we would have, like your traditional kind of tear off maps that, and we're talking to the hotels about how that might work and whether they can help to support it. So it's work in progress really, but take on board your point. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm very pleased to hear the enthusiasm. Where culture connects is something that's very important, I think. And I think Councillor Holder said this at a previous meeting when we didn't get the bid to be London Borough of Culture, that it's joining up the dots, the many dots that there are in the borough. And I'm very pleased to see that although we didn't succeed in that bid, that the energy and enthusiasm is taking us forward. It's very good to hear that from you, Harris, particularly tonight. Thank you very much. I'm also pleased that you've referenced, I brought my copy along, Upstream London, because I do think it is important to understand that culture is very diverse and it benefits everybody, but it's also economically beneficial to this community. And I always think about young people particularly, and I know you've got 3 themes. I think they're themes or strands or whatever, and one of them is culture and creative education. And I know you're doing a lot of work, and I think you're doing a lot of good work with the sort of what we call the formal institutions, schools. And I'm also really pleased to see you're working with universities, because I think universities in this age are reconsidering what they need to do within communities. We've seen that with Imperial, but we can also see that with the university that I know a bit about, UCL, and I'm pleased to see you're working with them. But I just wondered whether you are doing sufficient, perhaps, with more informal groups. I went to an absolutely amazing event, and I think one of our councillors over here was at it, at the Education City 1-year anniversary on, I can't remember which day of the week it was now, but it was last weekend. Fantastic. The energy there with the young people and their families. And I wonder whether you are sufficiently tapping into those sorts of more informal areas where the community meets and engages. Because they gave, I'm sorry if I'm going on a bit, they showed me a couple of maps of the area, the people that are running it. One of the maps showed the social deprivation in the area, over and beyond Hammersmith and Fulham. And the other map showed where the families and the children and the parents were coming from into that institution. And it was quite powerful, actually. In fact, very powerful that they were actually making that connection, if you know what I mean. So I'm just wondering, with the diversity of the communities that we represent, whether there's any more that you might want to do in that regard with those areas, particularly with young people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think this is another area where it's work in progress and we're moving towards. But I didn't give you the full list of everyone we're working with, but we already include, for example, the Masborough Centre as part of the Heritage Partnership, and we have a number. We've got our education colleagues involved. We're working with the Youth Voice Group, and we're doing so. The more we can reach out, and of course, the cultural organisations themselves, as you know, work with a lot of those groups in the community already. If anyone's got ideas for people we could get in touch with, that would be, really welcome. I think the intention is that we do develop more from the formal education side and into the community education side. So I'd really welcome your thoughts on where we should go to get those contacts. I know members are all very well connected in your wards, so that always helps. Thank you.
Coming back from that, because it's just you started, and obviously, as Councillor Patel was saying, you've set up your group. It's just, I would hope that group is still inclusive enough to engage other people and get other people involved as you move on, rather than it just being seen to be that sort of group that's taking this forward. That's all I'm really raising. Thank you.
Yes, so very much the compact itself was intended to be as a tight executive group. and there's the subgroups that are doing the work are completely inclusive, and we're also on the compact. We have, for example, HQI, which is a organisation that's working with us on a project to bring forward young people who are entering the commercial music sector, and many of whom have come through unconventional or informal routes. And of course, that's the same with some of the students that go into the formal provision. So yeah, but just to reassure you, those wider groups are, there's no limit to the number of people who can be involved in those conversations, and they definitely are inclusive.
Can I just say, Councillor Adam, the story you shared, I think, is very powerful. And I think we should always remember, in terms of the key people who are the hardest to serve, are the ones we should be looking and focusing our efforts towards. So on the issues of, just to confirm what Val has basically shared with us, in issues of groups, especially within the executive working team, I always think, look, we're never going to be a closed committee. If individual organizations, obviously you'll have a better understanding of the organizations that we should be working with in your particular areas. Those organizations that you think that should be more active in this area, are more than welcome them to kind of join and become active, even at a committee stage level. I think what we have to always share, and one of the points I made earlier on, is that sadly a lot of these sectors, including the organizations that you've talked about, funding is very scarce, and they don't have a lot of free time to attend additional meetings. We currently have a meeting once a month. We do one online, and the following one is in person. More than happy for other individuals who want to give their time to join that committee, but sadly, lots of people already got massive constraints or in their ability to deliver their work in their areas, and find that quite hard to do. So I'm very keen to make sure that those organizations who can't commit time do feel a part of this process and do feel they have input. So we do welcome any kind of names, organizations that you think should be working with us. The other thing I'm very keen to ensure is that when I joined the compact, is that there is so much, as you said, passion, desire, energy. What we want to try to focus on is actually impact as well. So sometimes the danger of these types of committees is that you spread your net too wide and actually end up not delivering in terms of things that we want to show that, look, we are making a difference. So I'm quite confident with the way that we've currently set up, is that we want to focus on delivering impact. We want to come back to this committee and say, look what we've done to make a change within Hammersmith and Fulham. And then why are we not actually making this even further and wider within the borough? Why can't we do this better in other areas? But I'm determined to make sure that we can actually demonstrate some impact for you first, and hopefully come back and you challenge us to say, look, you need to do this even better.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, thank you very much. I think it's been a very interesting conversation so far, and thank you very much for a very excellent report and presentation. I mean, I think to come back actually to that last point, I guess that is what we would be interested in. I mean, so you've presented some of it tonight, but is really what is really sort of about promoting the success and some of the, perhaps the statistics that are coming out of how we can how you can sort of demonstrate some of that success. I mean, clearly you've got the Countdown to Christmas campaign. There's something to say for that. Hopefully, once we've had the School Arts Week, there will be some more to say about that. So, yeah, understanding the impact, obviously ensuring there's as much as possible a diverse offering, will be really helpful to this committee and to obviously the sort of council and wider as a whole. But I think those sort of statistics and some understanding of how it's working will really help. So if you can overlay that in future presentations, which I'm sure you're going to do, that would be great. I think the other, to actually come back, and I think it sort of segues into the point that you were, well, segues away from the point you were making, is I quite like the partnership structure that you've set up, in the sense that it does seem fairly focused. You know, it's quite clear what it is. So this seems to have a clear line through from the Arts Commission through to the cultural strategy and some of the broader issues we've discussed. So certainly destination management is something we've discussed in this committee in different reports over the course of the last couple of years. So it's good that there's a focus on that. And I think that the melding and sort of shaping together of the sort of cultural strategy and some of the sort of visitor economy is very much to be encouraged. I think we've obviously had 13,000 new people working in White City as a result of Upstream. Clearly, of an evening, they might want to go to the Bush Theatre or somewhere else. I think that works also two ways, because somewhere like the Bush Theatre promotes new writing, and it may be some of the people that they're promoting actually work with some of the people who are now coming to work in life sciences or some other industry in White City, and see the vibrancy of what's going on there. So I think if you can demonstrate or sort of give us some examples of how that's working, that would be great in the future, because I'm sure that's what's happening. So, which leads me to some of the questions that I've got, which is just, I wonder if you could explain, and obviously it's slightly, I'm not sure it's in its infancy, but obviously if you're doing it for the first time, is how the different sort of work streams are going to learn from the campaigns that they take forward. So obviously the countdown to Christmas, how is that? Is there going to be a report, and then you consider how things can be done better in the future and what other sparks fly off that? So interested in what you've got to say about that. Also wonder if you could say a little bit more about this School Arts Week. Again, that would be interesting to see the breadth of what that is, and almost also to see a sort of mini report almost on how that was put together and how it worked, and what the sort of lessons learned were from that. Again, looking to understand the impact that it's had, I think.
So yes, thanks very much. So with the countdown to Christmas and those kinds of campaigns, they are very much being we have a lot of statistics. So we are part of the High Street Data project, which is a GLA funded project, which we use to gather the information about footfall and spend. But we've also recently engaged with London and partners to talk to them about the work that they're the London-wide destination agency. So they've been helping us with identifying patterns of travel and visitors across the whole of London. All that work is going to Destination Partnership tomorrow for them to unpick and figure out, well, what does that mean we should do next? So I think we can come back after tomorrow with a better explanation of, what are the next steps that have been agreed. In the meantime, the partners have agreed that they felt it was successful and they want to continue and develop it. So I think that's good demonstration of the impact they feel it's had. But yes, we will be gathering a lot more data on that. Should I just say something about Schools Arts Week? So Schools Arts Week, again, started very much with Harris pushing us along into the kind of, well, what are we going to do with children and young people that we can do in the short term? And so the development of that was really a question of, well, what could we do? Well, this is a contained project we can talk to education colleagues about and see whether there's an interest in it, and it would give us a springboard to build those relationships and collaborate for the first time and see whether we can make an impact. So that project is going to be, I think I listed the partners as we went through, a range of different workshops that schools can choose from in order to get their Year 5 classes involved. And there are some funders in that group of organisations that are supporting just with money, but most of the organisations are supporting by providing workshops free of charge as part of that project. And I think that will give us a good feedback as to, are those the sorts of things that people would like to see the compact do? And if we can create enough energy and enthusiasm in the group, what would we do next? And I think what we'll do next is try to expand that so that we've got a good basis for shared working. I'm sure I don't need to tell any of you that building these partnerships is quite a long-term process. So it's like we have to get everyone together, agree what's needed, try something, see if it succeeds. Hopefully that galvanizes people to move on to the next stage.
Absolutely. I mean, I would hope a lot of this becomes sort of a virtuous circle, in a sense, if that's the right way of describing it. In particular, I'd be interested, so I don't know if you've got any final comments, I know you've referred to this, in terms of how you work either with partners or with broader, say, business, for example. So one of the things that I think we were keen to stress or keen to understand at a previous meeting, which may have been 18 months ago or so, or longer, I think someone came along from one of the local hotel chains, and there was a question about, are they promoting arts and other stuff within there, because that's clearly good for them, their business, in terms of people who are staying at whichever hotels it might be are then able to find something to do in the evening that's cultural in Hammersmith or Shepherd's Bush or Fulham. And I guess hopefully if that sort of builds up, I guess the question is whether from those sorts of organisations or from further afield, there's sort of more funding that, or sort of that might come in for other projects from people who can see the sort of not quite commercial, but sort of economic value of some of the culture that's going on. That builds those links, I guess.
Yes, so that's a good example actually, because when we are talking about the destination work, when I talked about the product strand, very much what we're doing is looking at when are the hotels got beds that are not occupied, when are there opportunities to do something that could draw in visitors that would benefit people, because there's no point in us putting something on when all the hotel beds are full, because that will just displace the trade to neighbouring hotels. So that's very much the idea, is to use the data that we're collecting to be a bit more intelligent about how do we work together to plan product that will satisfy that market. And then, of course, the idea is that the hotels and the hospitality businesses and other businesses will help to support that, the production of that, and it would be, as you say, a virtuous circle in that respect.
So just to finish, I mean, I think one of the things that we had in mind was if there's any sort of, I think you mentioned it, there's perhaps not necessarily, but in the report, is there some sort of sort of summer holiday type program, in the sense that we're assuming that there are a lot of people coming to London and staying in Hammersmith and Fulham. There was a lot to do with making more use of the river in particular, promoting Hammersmith and Fulham, but also having in our sort of town centre type areas, be that may or may not work, Shepherd's Bush Green, Furnival Gardens or whatever, stuff that sort of, I mean, you get in sort of more continental European areas, festivals during the summer, which are designed to, bring together the tourism that's going on, and that would obviously present us with an opportunity. Clearly, there are other events that go on down by the river that we can do more. We can certainly do more to promote and bring people in and improve business. But I wonder if there's anything specific this summer that's going on, or whether there is an opportunity to do one or two things there.
So probably be better prepared to answer that question when the destination partners meet tomorrow, because that's one of the things they'll be talking about, is the summer campaign, and it is very much that hand in glove. What do we do? What do we promote? But also, what's the offer? So there is an idea to promote, to join activities over the summer, to create a kind of either to create some sense of a festival right over the summer period, and potentially to plug some gaps if there are weekends when there isn't something happening. And to return to your point about the riverside, I think that's very much something that's come out of the discussion with partners, is that the riverside is sort of underutilized as a visitor attraction, and to think about how do we position that as a place where you can visit and enjoy that environment. So yeah, sort of hopefully we'll be able to bring something back to you on the summer offer before too long.
Is there anything else? So thank you very much for thank you very much for the update. I think as you can hear, I think there's sort of pretty universal acclaim for the work that's been done. It's been, obviously this has been a long-term project, and it seems like there's bearing some fruit at the moment. And clearly the idea is that this is a sort of sustained compact that lasts throughout the years and sort of builds those virtuous circles and links, and expands the cultural life and the, with it, in some cases, the economic life of the borough. So thank you very much indeed. I think we obviously have heard some of the aspects which we'd be interested in hearing a bit more about, or sorry, perhaps you can incorporate in some of the work about, what is culture, ensuring that there's, not, as Councillor Borland was saying, it's not all online, and that we're managing to reach out more broadly, and that the education and other aspects are brought into account. Certainly very, from my own part, very encouraged by the work that's been done on the visitor economy and joining up with the upstream industrial strategy. So gratefully could take those points away and have a think about them, but we very much look forward to an update in due course on some of the other campaigns, that the development more broadly of the Cultural Compact, but also the some reports on the impact that some of the campaigns are going to have in the future. So thank you very much indeed. Let's just give it a moment as we move on to the next item. So, sorry, could we move on to item 5, the active wellbeing strategy? And I think Nigel Court, who's the interim lead for sport and active wellbeing, I think is going to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair. My name is
Scott.
Nigel Court. I'm the interim lead for sport and active wellbeing, and tonight I'll just be giving you an overview of our current progress on the active and wellbeing strategy. Before I start, the photo there is hot off the press. That's from the mini marathon on Sunday, and I'm pleased to say that a resident from Hammersmith and Fulham actually won the boys' race. So really good news for our overall score in the London Youth Games. What a start, I'm pleased with that. Okay, so the active and wellbeing strategy will supersede the sport and physical activity strategy. We're moving towards a system-based approach linked to improving public health, therefore being more rounded and inclusive strategy, which will deliver a wider range of improved outcomes for individuals and communities. The strategy links to health and wellbeing strategy from the borough, which has already been approved and you probably may have seen already, but it will support other key ambitions, such as improving people's ability to work in the local economy, supporting company infrastructure, and enabling the residents to take the lead in interventions that are appropriate to their needs. It will also focus on addressing the challenges of getting people who are inactive and minimally active to become more active through 3 strands, and they will be the active people, active communities, and active environments. The wellbeing approach engages more broadly with wider sector partners in health, community and voluntary sectors, as well as leisure providers and clubs around the borough. The involvement of the residents affected by the barriers and to activity is essential to understanding that the needs and working with them to co-produce programs which support them to raise the levels of activity moving forward. So these are our strategic themes, the active peoples. They will focus on creating opportunities for our residents who are currently inactive. The active communities working with residents and communities to create accessible and welcoming entry points to more active lifestyle, and the active environments making the public realm a place to support people and moving in the locality. The benefit of this strategy will be working with colleagues within our council in other departments actually to support what they're currently achieving, because together by working cohesively, we're actually going to be producing a better outcome for our community, full stop. Thank you. So the challenge for Hammersmith and Fulham, public health. The local public health data shows significant disparities between the population growth in the borough. In particular, life expectancies varies from by 6.5 years for men and 9.5 years for women across the borough. Over half the population is overweight, and ill health is closely correlated with wider disadvantages, including inequalities that create less healthy environments, e.g. housing, pollution, less healthy lifestyles, food, poverty, and less healthy communities, access to facilities and localised programmes. People from different ethnic backgrounds are also differently affected, and these population groups tend to experience greater levels of deprivation, and other cultural factors play a part in deterring them from traditional forms of sport and physical activity. These were the health and wellbeing strategy's 4 key priorities. Forgive me, I'm going to concentrate on priority 2. And that's people are getting better connected and feel safer within their own communities. That's where I feel I can really have a bigger outcome and a bigger result for success. People, particularly those affected by health inequalities, can influence and inform initiatives that impact them. More people of diverse communities and backgrounds are empowered to engage meaningful in their communities and lead positive change through research, community participation, volunteering, and civic involvement. It's important that we identify within the strategy every member of our community, starting from birth to early childhood, to the key section around the 5 to 17-year-olds. If we get a good engagement and actually a good practice in place at that point in their life, then they are more prone to actually continue with the physical activity and be more active into adult life. We will speak and decide how we will work with our 18 to 16-year-olds, and we won't forget the 65 and overs. They need to be active as well, and actually they need to be more participating in more activities, not just in one single activity, to actually see the benefit of being in an active lifestyle. So this is the Active Live data, and it's a national survey by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and it's into sport and physical activity levels. The data was released at the end of last week. It's one of our KPIs in our corporate plan as well, and it identified that as a borough, we are the 5th most active borough in London. And that was the same. We haven't moved in terms of our position, albeit we have slightly increased on those that are exceeding 150 minutes plus per week within their active lifestyles. What does it tell us? Well, actually, yes, we have moved forward. However, we've also seen an increase in inactivity. So that means that we do need to be concentrating on those areas and the pockets of our community that aren't doing anything or less than 30 minutes per week at this moment in time. Quite a powerful statement. Physically, inactivity contributes to 1 in 6 deaths in England. Moving from inactive to minimal activity adds 3 years to life expectancy. So what we could do is target key target groups. In terms of adults, we can, the 6 to 17-year-olds, if we increase the activity in childhood, it carries through to increased activity in adulthood. So the schools programs and our connections and talking to local schools and community groups and sports groups are going to be very key in how we succeed and move forward in delivering an active community. The national recommendations for children are 60 minutes per day to moderate vigorous physical activity, including muscle strengthening activities. Adults, 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous activity, or a combination of 2 episodes or more resistance activity, limited sedentary behaviour. And over 65s, multi-component physical activity at moderate or greater intensity of 3 or more a day in order to enhance functional capacity to prevent falls. If we are able to do that, then we can obviously support public health by less admissions to hospitals, etc. So the whole point of this strategy is to complement what other parts of our borough are doing as well. Key considerations, just I won't read it off the screen, but barriers to participation, physical activity peaks in primary school age, and then the benefits from that is more physical health, improved mental health, self-worth and identity, stronger communities. So, suggested vision of this strategy echoes the national body ambition from Sport England, and that's for the universal engagement in sport and physical activity under the banner of more people, more active, more often. We see a society where everyone has the opportunity and motivation and access to lead an active, healthy lifestyle. And through that, our umbrella will be of active communities, active people, and active environments. So, in terms of active community, it's all about co-production with our communities. Starting from the point of departure, using trusted community partners to support engagement and dialogue with residents to generate ideas on how activity can be integrated into their lives. We've got so much going on with our borough. One of the things that we need to improve on, and the success of our strategy, is about communication and delivering a strong comms plan so actually our community knows what's actually happening across the whole borough. And I think that will be a real success if we're able to do that. We'll look to conduct seated exercise programs in residential homes. We will look to continue to work with community leaders to interact with the community. We will identify more opportunities to offer more women-only sessions across our leisure facilities. They're currently very well attended. There's just maybe 1 or 2 per week, which isn't enough. We will be community-driven activities are often the best part of involvement. So best examples we can give, dad walking exercises and just chatting along the way. It doesn't have to be strenuous exercise. It's just being physically active and actually enjoying it. A good example also, I don't know if everyone has seen it, over in Sweden, there was an example of a tube station, and there was an escalator and a stairwell. And daily commuters were utilising the escalator to the point where they were actually queuing to use the escalator to go up the escalator because they weren't prepared to use the staircase. Overnight, a team of people put some musical sounds and tunes that looked like a piano going up the stairwell. And over a period of time, when people started to have fun by participating and just walking up the staircase, it actually changed the mentality and mindset of the individual and the local community by actually doing something fun which they never thought of dream of doing. So it's just thinking outside the box of being positive and identifying simple ways to change people's perception and what they can do. So in terms of active environment, develop public spaces, invest in parks. We need to make the area a safe space. We need to make sure that people are comfortable in going. We've got some fantastic park gyms that people are utilising. The one particularly up at Linford Christie, just outside the Linford Christie Stadium there is a hive of activity daily. And it is bringing a real community together. And actually, when you talk to the guys up there, like the first impressions, you might think that they'll be quite offsetting, they might be quite abrupt, they're quite aggressive. They're not. They're a community that are utilising a really fantastic space. And I think we're making really good use of that at the moment, but it's what we can do more. We've got opportunities to look for investment for our 106 funding by improving our overall artificial pitches across the borough, to deliver best practice on our Moogers, and even looking at our Ravenscourt Park paddling pool, which will then drive activity during the summer months. We'll ensure spaces are clean, safe, accessible for all ages. Our groups will provide funding opportunities, and we're partnering with local business and national governing bodies to ensure that we work with non-profits to extend community space. Around active people, we'll identify what our community wants to hear. We need to be trusted to be delivered to what the community wants to have within it. We will meet the local communities, we will listen, and we will signpost opportunities. We will organise community challenges, and we will work with schools to develop a network of local organisations wanting to make a difference. And we will improve the communication between in-house colleagues to work together on delivering the action plan. So next steps, and since the work reflects the previously agreed health and wellbeing strategy and the themes have already been through public consultation, the main task now is to ensure governance of structure that reflects the aims and the priorities. This means convening a wider group, including residents' representation and community groups, and to act as a delivery board. And whilst we set out a time frame, we will aim to be in the position to bring that time frame forward. This step is underway at present and will be followed by finalising the action plan with partners over the coming weeks. The draft of the strategy and action plan is expected to be ready for approval by July. And given the roles of the playing pitch strategy and the indoor leisure strategy, work is informing the actions needed to maintain the current activity levels for those who are active, and that will take 12 months because they need to have two seasons, a winter season and a summer season of activity. So what I'm suggesting we do is we finalise or the final draft of the action plan, and we are in the capability of changing any action plans based on what the outcomes are from those playing pitch strategies and the indoor leisure strategy, which will take 12 months to complete. Our facility of capacity during certain times of the week, in addition of contracts with providers, are long-standing, can be revisited in order to influence the greater alignment with the new approach. We'll therefore keep the strategy under review whilst the outcomes of the playing pitch strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure we'll have many things to say about it. Councillor Patel, did you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of positives to be taken from this report. Since 2015, Hammersmith Fulham Council has been one of the most physically active boroughs in the country. Every year since 2020, 73% of the borough's population has achieved the recommended minimum of 150 minutes per week of physical activity. Health statistics for obesity and overweight in HNF are better than the London and England average for adults. So those are all positive things. I've actually walked up, when I came to this meeting, I walked up Ilbrook Common, and I was a bit lazy. I took the underground from Fulham Broadway to here. I should have walked it. The remarkable thing was that when I walked through Ilbrook Common, I didn't see anyone on a beautiful day like today playing cricket, football, or any sporting activity. I note that there is a program of getting young children or young schoolboys away from, or schoolgirls, from smartphones and online gaming. Can you tell us how we're going to achieve that? I mean, is there a campaign to go into schools and actually tell them the benefits there are in active participation in sports as opposed to being in front of a screen? Many years ago, when I was at school, physical education was a compulsory thing. The only way you can get out of being PE, even on a terribly cold day, was by a letter from your GP. It was compulsory. Now I believe that smallest of excuses, you're excused from it. I think it's essential that that people of secondary school age are told the benefits of physical of sports, not simply not for society as a whole, but for their own benefit. As you've said, people who play sports are much more focused. They usually end up in better education grades. They are successful in business. And I think those benefits have to be put across. And in my view, in an age where teachers are under considerable pressure to deliver the services they have to, I think it is essential for officers to go into schools and just say a few words of the benefits of participating in sporting activities.
Thank you, Councillor. I totally agree. I think part of the action plan and holding meetings with key stakeholders is identifying who the best people are that can deliver that message. Like you say, the schools are seriously under pressure to deliver an agenda and identify them. From our point of view, we need to make the opportunity to be physically active something that they want to do. The biggest target group that we've got a concern of is young women that go into senior school. Once they leave junior schools, they tend to tend off to actually filter away from active enhancements and delivering some sort of sporting activity. We need to listen to the younger community to identify what we need to be in the position to deliver to ensure that that still stays a key aspect of their livelihood and their lifestyles. So one of the aspects that we will be doing as part of our action plan is working with stakeholders, identifying it, selecting a role model from key community groups that is going to be delivering and speaking to young people to ensure that we continue to move forward and actually improve. We're very proud of the stats that we're one of the healthiest boroughs in terms of evidence that suggests that, but we've still got a percentage of people that are inactive, and we need to ensure that we don't forget about that and we work hard to improve that statistic, as well as allowing the existing 75% of our active community to remain active at all times. Thank you.
Councillor Borland, did you want to come in?
Thank you very much. It's extremely admirable and quite shocking to see some of the differences, especially around life and expectancy in a borough like Hammersmith and Fulham. I wanted to just bring out one point, which was around the kind of playing pitch strategy, and that I would urge us to kind of complete that as quickly as possible. I know this is quite anecdotal, but from my own ward, I have 3 parks in my ward, incredibly lucky. One of which is Hurlingham Park, which is kind of primarily a sports, it does have its areas of beauty, but it kind of has pitches and things. I know from residents that the all-weather pitch there is kind of on its last legs. I also know from the rugby club that there's a huge section at the bottom of Hurlingham Park that's completely waterlogged and unusable for most of the year. So I would say that it's extremely admirable to be reaching out to everyone to be active, but we need to remember the current users, and actually a lot of our offering isn't quite up to scratch. A lot of our pitches are used within kind of an inch of their lives. And that's important both for the money that brings in, also for local schools to provide, affordable outside space and to get kids out playing sport and running around. But I think that for residents, sometimes they don't see that money, because there's always a battle in our green spaces. We just don't have enough of it. It's London. So we've got dog walkers. There's so many users of our spaces. And for residents, I think they are happy to see children out, of course, taking up a pitch, playing football, doing whatever they're doing. But then they want to kind of see, I think sometimes they feel they don't see that money going back into the spaces, and they're not as well maintained as they could be. And as I said, this is quite anecdotal from my ward, but I would be pretty sure that's replicated across the borough. So yeah, I would just urge us to really look at what we've already got. And I wonder how you feel you can balance out the needs of residents and the football player and the dog walker, and how they fit together, and the child and everyone in between, because there's a lot in this word active. That's everything. I assume that's everything from somebody that goes out for a stroll, a quick lap around the park in the evening, all the way up to someone that, kind of does the mini marathon. There's a lot in between. And so it's just how you see that balances with the current users of our borough and our spaces.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, it's a fair point, and it's something that I've been liaising with my colleagues in the Parks Department about how we can identify. So Hurlingham does have a master plan that's being formed around the actual developments of there. Last year, a significant amount of our funds went into the refurbishment of the Linford Christie facility, which is north of the borough, obviously, and it's something that we are starting to see, and already based on it's not even finished yet, and we're already seeing schools that are booking in slots now for September because of what they're going to see. So they've seen a visual of what the facility was going to be, and already there's a demand for that facility. That will only help and enhance our plan and our desire to make further improvements. We have applied for a serious amount of funding in regards under the 106 section to put back into our facilities. And I'm hoping to have a good news story to work with colleagues in Parks to be able to deliver that, because if that is the case, I will be chairing a team that will actually go and then put that out across the rest of the borough. In terms of the overall picture, it is literally just listening to our community. It's being able to be a forefront and being out there and prepared to take the good with the bad and identifying what we've done, what we're doing well, but fundamentally what we're doing wrong and what we can improve on. So for part of the team and part of our organisation, and even part of my sports officers who maintain the parks and the sports offerings around the parks, he's been a focal point and being a face that people can relate to. We are picking up a number of cases. One of my colleagues is going around and speaking to local community groups regularly, and it's being shared, and feedback is then coming back to identify what improvements we can make. I'm hoping we're going to start to be, like I put in my presentation, I want our community to trust what we're saying we were going to go and do and actually deliver it. So I'm hoping in the near future people will start to see change going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much. I think unless we ran the marathon on Sunday, all of us could do more exercise. In fact, Councillor Patel, my GP told me that only last week, that I needed to do more exercise. But I just wonder whether it's such a diverse picture and it's successful, and let's start with that, compare with other London boroughs, but we mustn't be complacent. Is there any way that we could take some examples of good practice, and there's many of that taking place across the borough? And I'm thinking of some of the groups that maybe even got awards recently. You mentioned the Masbro Centre. There's the Masbro Elders. I'm sure there's some school groups, or there's some youth work groups that are doing some work which is actually challenging and seems to be working. Because quite often I like to see a few case studies. Because you can learn from that. You don't replicate that. Of course you don't, because each community is different. But sometimes there might be just a couple of bits in that. You think, oh, that's really, must be very simple. Do exercise on a Tuesday night or something. I don't know. But so occasionally it might be, I would quite like to see, with all the wealth of what's going on in the borough, just maybe 2 or 3 or half a dozen examples. Just go and say, well, what are you doing about it? And what more could you do? I mean, they don't have to be examples of good practice, excellence. They could be just interested in doing it. And you might say, well, what actually support do you need in order to engage with that group, whether that be the Masbro Elders with people, or maybe, I think it's a very important point you make about young girls, in transfer up to high school. But I'm sure some schools are doing some good work on that. So it's just, I'd be interested in seeing that, actually, sharing the good practice so that we can improve even more where we are at the moment in terms of our health and our wellbeing engagement and with London boroughs. Thank you.
If I could just say that I think that's really, really valuable. And what we have tried to do is to expand that group of providers that we're talking to. And in fact, recently we had a day-long session with those stakeholders that included the SEAC and the Dance Wests, so a wide range of providers. And the things that they told us were about what they'd seen and what they'd been doing. But the thing they most wanted to see happen was coordination between them, so that they did share what worked, and they could also refer people to activities, because an activity can be appealing to somebody and not appealing to somebody else. So that idea that the more you know about what's going on, the more you can connect people to where they can find the things which would work for them. And I think that's a really important part of the partnership that we're setting up.
Just to follow on from that, I think we're very lucky. We've got 3 professional football clubs as an example within our borough. And actually, they're not in competition with each other. They're actually working together collaboratively to ensure that the whole community is represented and serviced, rather than just trying to do better than what the other club are doing. And that's the benefits of having that. And they were all around the table recently working in partnership with us to deliver what our goals and our objectives will be. Thank you.
Well, just coming back on that very quickly, thank you. It's just evidence. I think we could do with a bit more evidence. That's what I'm saying of where it works and also where it doesn't work. That's probably what I'm driving at. Thank you.
I agree, and I think I presented that one of our shortfalls at this moment is communication, and it's about advertising, but also delivering success as well and identifying success. So part of the action plan is to ensure that the community knows what's going well at the moment and what we can do, as well as fantastic news stories which we can share with yourselves. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. Thank you very much for the report and the update on how the strategy is going. I should say I'm more encouraged having heard the presentation and discussion tonight, because we have had several iterations of the sports and physical activity strategy, and I was sort of hoping it would have landed by now as a final strategy. However, from what I think you've been describing tonight, it sounds as though there are some actions that are happening and ready to go. We're not sort of waiting around for finalising something and then taking action. It sounds as though there is a lot of there's sort of activity on the cards to encourage people, particularly focusing on people who, with a focus on people who are physically inactive in that sort of 18 to 20% that you mentioned in the presentation. So, sorry, I'm encouraged by that and glad to hear that there's sort of going to be some action on that. I wonder, we've sort of talked around this a little bit, but what the communications are for those who are, say in the next 6 months, those who we think are in that 18% who are inactive, and sort of, I suppose, we may have discussed this before, who are they? What sort of communications and other actions are we taking to encourage them to become more active, sort of locally, but also are there sort of wider communications that we can build on? I mean, presumably this sort of physical inactivity of 1/5 of the population or whatever is not entirely a Hammersmith and Fulham thing. It's probably happening elsewhere as well, and presumably there are strategies and actions that are happening elsewhere. So interested in that question. Interested then as a sort of subset, whether you mentioned that women-only sessions in some places are very popular, whether there is the, as you say, whether there is the ability both to do a bit more of that without squeezing other users out, but also to make the point that they are popular, because I mean, clearly I wouldn't know, and obviously lots of other people don't know, but I guess actually making the point that that is a popular way of delivering some physical activity would be sort of useful to sort of advertise as a point, I think. So I wondered if you got some comments on those points.
The next few weeks, we'll be reaching out to community leaders and identifying those community leaders that have within their community the larger percentage of the inactivity. We will be identifying with that community of what the issues are and fundamentally what they would like to do. Quite often you see at the Linford Christie Stadium, for example, schools turn up and certain demographics of the school children have no interest in running around a track, but they are forced to do it as part of the curriculum. That's not going to encourage that young person to actually be more active moving forward. So the answer is within local communities, and it's delivering and identifying from them. So it's going to be listening to them, identifying them, and then putting a plan together for them that is going to improve that 18% of inactivity going forward. Around other specific gender-only sessions, we can be doing more, I think. I think we're identifying leisure centres are open for over 100 hours a week. We can make it work in terms of identifying that we're not taking away public time in the evenings when there's a more opportunity for the general public to do it, but there's enough opportunity within our borough and within our opening times to be able to put on sessions, even at reduced rates with our partners, to deliver sessions where people can feel encouraged to do so. By putting on generic women-only sessions, that is not always working. It doesn't always work effectively. Sometimes we have to, what I've had to do elsewhere in North London Borough, for example, in the past, we had to put on sessions where we went into local communities first, and we delivered a 6 or 7 week programme and then we introduced them into the wider community after that, because they felt more comfortable in participating in some sort of physical activity within their own communities initially, and then we integrated them into the wider public and invited them to the leisure centres afterwards, after a period of time. That way it builds their confidence up by just putting on women-only sessions at this moment in time. Will still not actually remove barriers. And so it's educating ourselves and our colleagues to ensure that what we are doing is that we're listening to the local community leaders and identifying what works for them.
Yeah, if I could just follow up a little bit on your question about how we reaching and what are we publicising. We are part of a national active wellbeing network, which is working with health professionals at the national level. There is a lot of concern, obviously, as you can imagine, about population health. And so there will be some campaigns, and so there are some campaigns already. I don't know if you've seen the More Ball Games campaign, placing the sort of signs of no ball games and just sort of starting to encourage people. So that's one thing. But the other thing is we are working very closely with public health colleagues, and some of these people are already known to us in the system, and actually direct contact with people is another way to reach them. So I think that's another benefit of trying to do this systems-based approach, is actually that we can identify where people are and we can get better insight into how to reach them.
I'd be very interested in both the last thing you talked about in terms of the wider communications, and also how, once you've done further work, the development of the individual, well, not sort of, more tailored plans for certain groups. And certainly if you can bring that out in future reports, that would be really good, because I think understanding how the sort of steps you've taken to, trying to address, as part of the strategy to try and address some of this would be really interesting, and we'd be interested to see what the impact of that is as well. I mean, as I think a final point, I'm interested to understand how the equipment that we've got at the moment is working. Interested to know, I think you mentioned it already, that the outdoor gyms are well used, so that is good to hear. I should also say that I do see, obviously, it's not uniform all at once. Certainly in some places where you've updated playing pitches, I think we may have discussed this at previous meetings, such as Hammersmith Park has got some new basketball and tennis courts, and those surfaces look excellent, I should say, and they are seem to be very well used. Good to hear that there will be plans for other bits of the borough as well with playing pitches, and I'm sure that will be developed. Useful to know, perhaps in future reports, what the sort of rollout of different updates to some of that equipment might be, just for our own edification, and also to understand a little, to the extent you've got, to understand the condition, the sort of condition of the pitches elsewhere, and also the fact that some of them are being extremely well used, and we look like we've got some great facilities in a number of areas. So, sorry, I think we can just take that as a comment. But thank you very much for the report tonight. I'm glad to hear, as I say, that I think the comment I'd make is that work is going on, actions are happening, and we aren't waiting for a document to be put out at the end of December that suddenly then generates some momentum. It sounds like that's been done already, which is great to hear. I think we've got a few points I think that we would look for you to incorporate, but also to come back in further reports. There's the issue of sort of how pitches are, that Councillor Borland mentioned, about how pitches and other facilities are being maintained and upgraded, and to make sure that the best offering is there. Encouraging, continue to look at the strategy. I've no doubt this is all part of it, about encouraging children, particularly younger girls who are going into sort of senior school, to keep at it in terms of physical activity, and interested to know some stuff in future reports about sort of how you've identified and encouraged good practices, and really, but really interested to understand how the strategy will work, which you're sort of doing already, around people who we've sort of identified as more inactive at the moment. Thank you very much indeed. It's really interesting. Thank you. Okay, let's just take 30 seconds before we move on to the next item. So, thank you very much. So we're moving on to the final, last but absolutely not least, because we've got yet another very interesting item to finish tonight, which is place shaping through affordable housing development and community infrastructure, which we have talked about at intervals before in this committee. So very happy to welcome back Lubab, who is now Head of Partnerships, Investment and Insurance, to talk to us about this. So floor's yours.
Quite a mouthful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members, for inviting us to give you an update on our development program. My name is Lubab, and I'm, as the Chair introduced me, as the Head of Partnerships. I work within our Regeneration and Development team, part of Place Department. And when we put together this presentation, with development, not much happens necessarily in 12 months unless you hit that sweet spot where you've completed some developments and you can really talk about how you've delivered them. But at the moment, we're still in that sort of in construction. But hopefully by this time next year, when we give you another update, then we would actually point to completed schemes that you can see. But there are at least a couple of phases that we can talk about. So to keep this engaging, the way we wanted to look at it slightly differently is consider what place shaping looks like, given that we're now halfway through our development program and the community infrastructure we're looking to re-provide in the borough, and the lessons learned, but also some of the challenges that we might have seen. So what does, so we'll start by saying, what does a bit of background, how the development program came to be, the genesis of it, and what does good place shaping actually look like, and then where we are 12 months on from the last time you'd heard from us, and how do we think we're going to be progressing beyond that. So in terms of background, in 2017, you'll know the industrial strategy that Hammersmith and Fulham Council launched was about inclusive economic growth for all. And really, it's about ensuring that the borough is prosperous and that we can bring people along with us. And part of that sort of gave this the initial seed to deliver the building homes and community strategy. And that's really the genesis of our development program. It was about committing the council to delivering genuinely affordable homes to really meet the housing need that we have in the borough, but also renew key community infrastructure that we think is vital to the prosperity of the borough. And within that, it will deliver that inclusive economic growth. So the development program is quite ambitious. We're looking to deliver up to 1,800 new sustainable homes within the next 5 years. It's about renewing and delivering modern, fit-for-purpose social infrastructure, and throughout a commitment to co-design and co-production. That's a fundamental tenet that the council has committed to. That's something that we have implemented as one of the first departments within the organisation to actually involve residents in everything that we're doing from inception through, hopefully, to completion. So what does good place shaping address? We think there's 7 elements here. Affordable homes. We need to address that most basic of housing needs. We think it's about engaging community who can shape what's happening around them and on their doorstep. Social infrastructure, we think there's 2 broad camps that we can actually split these on. One is about, they're interlinked, but we think they're also sometimes can be distinct. One is about community infrastructure, things like our community halls, things about some of our key assets that where people get together, and some of the sort of the public realm around that. But also, there's social infrastructure in terms of education, in terms of nurseries, in terms of schools, in terms of adult education, those facilities that we think are important. Then there's economic inclusion. There's things like ensuring that there are opportunities for people in the borough, around the developments, in the different neighborhoods, so they can actually be involved and benefit from that inclusive growth that we're hoping to achieve in the borough. And there's the enhancement that we think need to also take place as part of public realm and our open spaces, and connecting places and connecting people to different places, and ensuring that certain areas are more open so that you can actually see the connections between spaces. And finally, and last but not least, is about sustainable, livable places. This is about rising to the challenge of climate change. So in terms of affordable home, the backdrop against which we operate is we know that this is the 3rd most unaffordable borough in London for key workers. We also know it's the 4th most expensive borough in the country. It's not particularly a table that we want to keep climbing, to be honest with you. So how do we address that? We know that we have 3,000 people or so on our social housing waiting list that we have a legal duty to house. We also know that we have 9,000 people, just under, who are desperate for intermediate homes. These are people who don't qualify for social housing, and because the borough is so expensive, can't really access it on the open market. What solutions are there for them? So that's the affordable homes challenge that we have in front of us. In terms of engaging communities, it's about doing more than just resident engagement and liaison. It's more about actually implementing things like defending council homes policy. It's about giving people a real stake in the decision making of how our development projects are brought forward, and involve them in shaping them, so they know actually their homes are secure, and this is about additionality, not threatening where they currently live. And in terms of taking that part of co-production even further, the disabled people's housing strategy is one of the first, is the first strategy that this council produced that is truly co-produced. It wasn't just data driven. It was working with disabled people in the borough to put that lived experience into paper and actually say the council is going to change, and this is how we're going to do it. It's about re-educating people. It's about building capacity within the disabled community to actually have a say in all of the different forums that we hold. One of the other challenges I talked about is the community infrastructure. It's looking at a fairer provision of that modern social infrastructure across the borough. We know that there's massive disparity. Sometimes when you look at it geographically, just north and south, you have 68% higher crime in White City, for example, than in Fulham. You have nearly 5 years life expectancy that's worse off in College Park and Old Oak than the rest of the borough. These are quite stark. How do you address some of that within your program and the things that you want to deliver, bringing people together? And then you have the social infrastructure from the point of view of education. We know that we need to deliver higher quality facilities to enable that learning. It's about one of the fundamental tenets of Upstream London, which is fundamental to all of this, is providing education and training opportunities for high growth sectors, looking at what's happening around the innovation district and how do you leverage some of that and enable people to partake in that. So one of the most deprived areas in our borough we know is White City Estate. So for example, we have 17% of residents with no formal qualifications. And look at the contrast between another part with Fulham, where you have a much higher percentage of people who are degree level qualified. These are all things that we need to address. And then there's economic inclusion. It's how do you ensure that there are the opportunities for people? Looking at some of the disparities here. We have the shared prosperity banner that we're trying to achieve. It's looking at, we have in West Kensington, the income deprivation is nearly double of that rest of the borough. So how do some of our developments within that ward can help address some of this? And then public realm and open spaces, we know from Upstream London that this is fundamental to stimulating economic growth, ensuring there are vibrant, practical, engaging community spaces, the places outside of our homes and our offices and our education facilities. These places need to be active so people can actually come together. And then there is as I said, the sustainable livable places, tackling that climate emergency that the council declared while we were delivering our program when we first launched it. A couple of years later, the climate emergency was declared by this authority. So then we took it upon ourselves to look at how we can actually influence what's being built in our program to meet that head on. Now, if we're talking about 11% of HNF residents living in fuel poverty, that's about 9,000 people, households, and that's actually quite significant. So how can our development program help address some of that? With that, we also dealt with COVID along the way. It seemed a long time ago, but actually the implications are massive. It's about thinking about how we redesign our homes and our schemes. Think about people are working from home a lot more. They need a bit more dwell space. Maybe need to be more inclusive spaces where actually they have that flexibility, but at the same time, not impacting negatively some of our economic activity that happens outside and near the office space. So all of these are key things to consider. So within our role within the development program, it's about, well, what are we delivering? It's an ambitious program. It's up to 1,800 homes that we think that we can be delivered when it's complete. And at the moment, we have completed on 78, and that's practically complete. People have moved in, or we've acquired, and we're waiting for the final sign-off so people can move in. 315 homes are currently on site under construction across 3 fantastic schemes. And then we have 344 that have just been given approval for planning resolution, and we'll go through that process at the moment. these are significant from a standing still position of Hammersmith, having not built for generations, to suddenly start delivering hundreds of units within a short period of time. In terms of our engaged communities, we've held numerous public exhibitions. For example, on our 4 sites, we've held 19 different events and design workshops and public consultations and public exhibitions. And that's to show that we're out in the community. And this is, you have said, and this is how we've built it together. This is how we've developed it. This is the feedback. These are where your suggestions have gone into shaping what's happening around you. We've organized things like meet the contractor date. Residents and our steering groups can actually meet the contractors on site who are going to be there for the next 2 years, building the homes that people could be living in. And then there's also, some social value there too. One of our contractors in Hartop and our contractor in Hartop and Lannoy has also donated £20,000 to a tree planting scheme, one of our local schools, showing that they're giving back to the community some of the as part of the commitment that they've had with our social value. In terms of our social infrastructure, well, how are we addressing that? And I'll do this a little bit differently. So in White City, we know that we've just had planning resolution to build a community hub for people to get together, organize themselves, and have meetings and events and things of that nature. So that's on the way. On Lily Road, we are developing a community hall that has been co-designed by the local community as part of that community engagement. Not only is the community hall going to be fit for purpose for them because they've designed it, actually we took time to think about the outside space, how that could be utilized by local schools for events, other communities. Again, this is how you bring people together to ensure there's that community cohesion. And West Youth Zone, where Upstream London was actually launched, is a stellar example of what you can actually achieve if you think a little bit more about the younger people and how you can involve and get them involved in some of your wider vision. It's a fantastic facility. There is more than 3,000 members. Weekly is visited by more than 500 people. And we know that 75% are from the global majority. So we know that from all those backgrounds, we're really reaching hard to reach groups and engaging them in physical activity, as we were hearing in the previous presentation. And it's fantastic. It's almost on a pay-as-you-feel basis. It's very, very minimal contribution to walk in as a young person. I think it's like 50 pence. But not only that, they get a meal as well as all the activities that they can have. It might be things like music, boxing, football, but actually there's a lot more. It's about that environment where they can see the opportunities available, learning new skills. So it's a fantastic facility, and that's on that corridor between White City and the Innovation District. So they can see what's beyond the estate. They can see all of the fantastic things that have been built around it. And actually they can see that that's within reach, and there's a way of getting there. From an education perspective, we know that with Ed City, which is where West was delivered, we've completed and handed over the ARC White City School, ARC White City School, and that's fully operational now. And to come, we will have a nursery and adult education space also being delivered as part of the Ed City Phase 2, which is hopefully completing by autumn/winter this year. And White City Central, which has had planning resolution, will also deliver another nursery school and a forest school, and planning permission is just about to be granted on that. So these are fantastic, new, fit-for-purpose, modern education facilities for people in the borough. From an economic inclusion perspective, there's massive social value in all of these contracts and all of these projects that we're undertaking. So, for example, there's 200 million at least we think that has been secured leverage in our projects. To give an example, 96 million is estimated to be around the Ed City project. 62% of that is local labour. In addition to that, 38 million has been spent locally also throughout the lifetime of the project. These are fantastic contributions to local economy. 19 apprentices and 614 weeks of combined apprenticeship training facilities, training opportunities that has taken place as part of that project. So real evidence of the benefits to the local economy. There's 100,000 square feet of commercial space developed and commissioned with mission-aligned organizations like ARC and education providers within the White City. So again, it continues that environment of education, innovation, and actually leveraging that in the borough. In addition to that, we've also leveraged external funding from the GLA to acquire some refugee housing to support those of most in need, house them in the borough, but also enable them and integrate them into society and giving them the economic means to support themselves going forward. You know, these are different approaches that we take to economic inclusion. From a public realm perspective, there's improved public realm in terms of creating new public squares in White City, improving the permeability through the estate. For example, there'll be, once it's built out, we estimate the connection from one side of the estate to the nearest underground station will have halved. So actually it's opening up the estate so people can, so it doesn't feel so insular, it doesn't feel so excluded from what's happening around it. Actually, when you open it up and you configure some of your development to enable some of those corridors, people can actually see the linkages. And that is really powerful because you're not confined to an area separate from another. There's no otherness to it. It's part of the same. And when you open it up and when you see in the next slide, you can see where Ed City is strategically located. It's on the corner of the White City estate, which is just beyond it. But actually, it's that corridor opening to White City Place. So you can see the Imperial Campus, Scale Space and Television Centre. And just over the road, you have White City Living. You know, all these high rises that are happening there. Actually, now you have a clear pathway from all of these things happening, from new housing, education, training, employment, and all of those facilities that you can see the pathway of how you can create it. And all of that is envisioned and aligned with the upstream London type of view. So that was a whistle-stop tour of everything we're doing. There's quite a lot there, but I thought I'd open it to more discussion, and obviously if you'll have more questions. One more element, I thought I'd done. There's one more slide actually. This is about sustainability and about livable places. Our first 3 schemes that are under construction at the moment that we are directly delivering as part of the program are being built to passive house sustainability standards. This is absolutely crucial in tackling some of the carbon emissions that we see in the construction sector. So we think that there'll be about 81% reduction of on-site carbon emissions on average within these schemes. Not only that, in terms of tackling fuel poverty, the residents moving into those homes, we expect that they'll see more than half of their money saved in terms of their energy bills because of the sustainability standards and the insulation and the technology used in developing those homes. And that's the 3 schemes will be about 206 homes in total. That's a significant number from standing still. And the first one that we think will complete will be around spring next year. It's the Heart Up and Lannoy site. That's 134 homes. That's now 100% affordable as well. So we managed to convert even the market homes because the scheme has performed well enough that we can actually do that. And it'll be 100% affordable housing scheme that is built to passive house standards, fully sustainable, that the council will manage, own, and be proud of. And the people moving in now know that they're actually contributing to greening the borough and saving a lot of money doing so.
Thank you very much indeed for the presentation and the report. So I should have mentioned that we've got a first-time visitor to the committee tonight, which is Councillor Francis Ume, who, as you can see, is the Cabinet Member for Housing and Homelessness. So welcome, Councillor Ume. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to the report before we go into any questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Great. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I note that under the upstream legal strategy, it's delivered approximately 1,800 homes in the future, and that 123 have been completed. The 123 which have been completed are 10 in Springwell in April 2022, and 112 in Education City. All of those homes were affordable homes, not any market homes.
That's correct, Councillor. They're all, excuse me, they are all affordable homes. 10 in Springville are all social rent, and the 132 in Ed City will all be affordable too.
Yeah, so if you don't have a market homes, the interaction between the consumers, the people who may purchase those homes, and the contractors is more like there's been much more interaction than if there were homes which are market homes where you don't have a lot to say so. Can I also ask one further thing? Under paragraph 5, you say that To this end, the program has been recently supplemented by a number of opportunities to purchase rather than build new affordable homes. Can you expand on that?
Yes, of course. If I can just ask you to clarify your first question, Councillor, the difference between market homes and the affordable homes and interaction with the contractor. Can you just elaborate further so I can understand?
Yes. If the construction is only for affordable homes, then I would have thought there'd be less interaction than in the market, where in the open market there'd be much more questions being asked because it's a different sort of market altogether. Is that right?
Well, the expectations are actually quite similar. I mean, with social housing, yes, there is a percentage of people that may not necessarily have the same expectations as private owners who are acquiring properties for hundreds of thousands of pounds. But actually, the expectations to live with sort of dignity and have respect and be treated fairly we know that that's across the board. Also, what we do have is a significant percentage of people who are intermediate housing owners. So these are people who are buying properties under shared ownership and things like discount market sale, who are also high earners, because within the envelope of affordable housing, a household could be earning up to £90,000 accessing these products. So actually their expectations are broadly aligned with market owners. So their expectations are still higher, and the standards to which we have to deliver our services are still just as high. So hopefully that answers that question. And the second one, you asked about the acquisition. So in terms of our acquisition, it's about approaching it from a mixed economy type of outlook, where we can deliver things ourselves because we can build, we have the land, and sometimes we can leverage external funding from the GLA and some of our own resources to do it ourselves and reap those benefits. But sometimes opportunities present themselves, such as Section 106 acquisitions, where we know a developer has to provide the affordable housing, and at a time when a lot of housing associations are inwardly focused and sort of tailoring all of their money towards inward investment, it presents an opportunity for the council to strike really competitive deals to acquire properties as well, and that could be delivered at pace, which means not only are you delivering and building your own, actually, if at the right time and the opportunity presents itself, you can acquire some. So we've done that in one scheme in Fulham for 37 affordable homes. We're just awaiting building control sign-off so we can actually take handover those properties. That's really exciting scheme because it's the first one we've done. But also other housing associations we know are divesting from some of their supported housing stock. So we've supported our colleagues in social care to acquire some, to maintain that provision, because that's important too. It's where you can approach it dynamically and know where your levels of influence are, as well as if you have the means and ability to do so, you can still supplement your pool of properties through that approach as well.
Thank you. That's a very good answer. You told us about these, that the houses are built to this passive was classic standard. It's paragraph 17 of your presentation. How much does that increase the cost of an average build?
We think in terms of construction, it could be about 10%, but in terms of design, it could be as much as 20%. It all depends at what point do you implement it. From the outset, the earlier you introduce it into your design element, or from the outset, the more money you save in the longer term. If you try to retrofit it, then it does cost you a bit more because you're revising some of your designs. Certainly, if it's a construction, it'd probably be, I would suggest, too late at that point. But certainly in design, the earlier you do it, the more money you save. We do think it's about 10%.
Can I just add really briefly, I suppose, Labab, if you could maybe share a little bit with regards to, I suppose, the longer term savings, because obviously Passive House Standards is delivering properties to the highest possible energy efficiency standard. And so while there may be that upfront costs and investment, the longer term savings for individuals living in these properties, because there are lower energy costs overall, sort of counterbalances that.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Councillor. It does, because they do see that saving, and from a council's perspective, hopefully also helps us with our own repairs and maintenance obligation as the landlord, because as we build these and as we factor them into our repair and servicing contracts, it'd be something we can achieve efficiencies, because we know have less to maintain or less interventions on some of the older technologies that have been implemented in some of our older stock. So the idea is to modernize as much as possible. So it's worth the initial outlay, because in the longer term, the savings that you'll make for both the consumer, the resident in the home, as well as the landlord with the council.
Councillor Borland.
Thank you for your report. I think we're all aware that housing is under huge pressure across the borough and across the country. So anything that we can do to alleviate that is fantastic, and especially to maintain the mix of communities and people. It's kind of what makes London London. I wanted to understand better what I know that most of all of the projects have got kind of at least 50% affordable. Can you just tell me what affordable actually means, you know, in kind of cold hard money terms? You know?
Thank you, Councillor. It's actually a slide that I had in here that I took out because I'm often reminded that I'm teaching people how to suck eggs a lot, but I do evangelize about it because to me, it's such a subjective term. It could mean a lot to a lot of people. When we talk about affordable, specifically in Hammersmith and Fulham, we talk about intermediate housing and genuinely affordable housing. Genuinely affordable housing, we mean by social rent, which is a typical council type property in terms of the rent that we charge, as well as London affordable rent. That's the lowest that you can charge in the marketplace at the moment. So in real terms, you know, we're talking about sub £200 a week potentially for a 2-bedroom property. That's the kind of rent that we're at. When you are comparing that with the open market, you're in the realm of £600 to £700 to £800 a week potentially. In terms of intermediate housing and shared ownership, well, these are governed by guidelines. So just on social housing first, that rent is set by a government formula. So that's how that's applied. And it's uplifted, again, in accordance with the social housing regulators' rent setting standard. In terms of intermediate, that's also governed by the by government policy. For rental products, a household would qualify for a rental intermediate home if the total household income is no more than 67,000, and if it's to acquire a property, so like a shared ownership, your household income can't exceed more than 90,000. But we still think that that's massive because £90,000 is a lot of money. So what we do within our program, as well as some of our negotiations with private developers who, because of this, we're no longer beholden to, we can say that we need a percentage of properties to be affordable to people earning 60K, 70K as a household, 80K. And that way you can show that you're catering for everyone at different income groups as far as possible. You are sometimes constrained because some of the way the products work are driven by the market value of the home. And unfortunately, if you're building a 3-bedroom flat in Fulham, sometimes it still has an open market value of £1 million. So you can only go so far. But what you do is you use something like a discount market sale where you can depress that sale price as far as possible and enable someone on a lower income to be able to buy it. So, and you know, I can send you more data on it if you'd like, but those are the kind of ranges that we're talking about. Okay, so we are talking about at least reasonably demonstrably.
Yeah, that's a better word. For these 9,000 households on the council's home buy register, and so by what you're saying, a good percentage of those would actually be able to attain.
Yes, you're absolutely right. In fact, we use that data to influence all of our decision making, whether it's negotiating with private developers, whether when we're building our own to target particular groups, because we know, when I say the particular income groups, because we know we have the data of what the typical profile looks like in terms of somebody and, you know, their age, their income, their savings, and how we can meet their aspirations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much, Labab. Your report was very interesting and your presentation as well. I was struck by a couple of statistics in there. First of all, I think you said that 52% of people, families are now, even some years after COVID, are working at home. I think you said that. That's interesting, very interesting. And also, I think, am I right in saying you said that most people that are waiting to be housed or on the list or whatever want family homes? They're not looking for like a 1-bedroom flat. Am I right in saying that? Right. Is that?
Yes, you're absolutely right, yes.
Okay, well, I just wondered, and I can be a bit anecdotal sometimes, apologies for that, but I was shown around recently, a group of us went around the civic campus, and I was amazed, actually, I was really pleased to see people who were already living there. I mean, that was fantastic. They're sort of hanging there, washing out and all that kind of thing, which is brilliant. So it does show the demand for properties. But also, when I went to watch the boat race a few weeks ago, I actually wandered into Wandsworth. I was walking down by the river there. I haven't been there for quite a while. I was absolutely, there was so much building that had taken place there, but a lot of it was offices. And I just wondered, I don't think it's quite such an issue in Hammersmith and Fulham, but it is across London. Is there any thought, any work going on in place shaping, given that what I just said about the number of people are using their homes differently, you know, they're using it to work in, whether we are considering anything about converting office space, if it's appropriate, to housing? Is there any opportunities for that or any thoughts of that in Hammersmith and Fulham or in London in general?
Thank you, Councillor. That's really more a question for my planning colleagues, but I do know that they're certainly receptive to ideas where some of that commercial market is stalled, if there are alternative provisions. But there are particular planning policies at play that I'm not probably the best versed on. But absolutely, I think there is a recognition that because we work differently now, actually that level of demand and what levels there are in terms of conversion, if that's possible. And I know that they're having those conversations too.
Chair, if I may also just add, I think there just also needs to be some serious consideration to the infrastructure and the structure of the buildings that are in place to make that a viable conversion. And actually there are examples where this hasn't worked, where individuals have tried this approach within London to convert office space into housing, and there have been quite disastrous consequences. So it's just being conscious of ensuring that, you know, officers are following the right approach.
Thanks very much. Sorry, thank you very much for the report. Very interesting to hear how, because we've seen the genesis of this over the course of the years, it's good to see now that we're in the middle of actually delivering some of these new homes. So in terms of comments, I should say that you made a statement, was in the slides, and also made a statement that we're involving residents from conception to completion. I think that's actually pretty much true, really. I mean, there are two of these schemes are in my ward, and I know that there's been a considerable amount of consultation with residents throughout the life cycle of the schemes. So I think, there have been some changes implemented as a result of a lot of the feedback from myself as councillor, and also residents, who are local to the schemes, either on the estate or adjoining the estates in some of these cases. So there has been, I think it's fair to put on record that there's been a lot of consultation and listening to what residents have got to say, and then actually incorporating and changing some of the schemes to fit around what people have said. So I think we should congratulate those people who've been doing all that, yourself and others who've been doing that in practice. So these are perhaps more points. Certainly, when we've mentioned this before, interested to see what family homes and units we're going to have. Certainly in advanced surgeries that I run, lots of people are overcrowded and looking for bigger accommodation. I think we often hear that 2-bed accommodation is the sort of thing that we need, but I see a lot of families where clearly they're in need of 3 bedrooms and upwards, and hopefully, I think Old Laundry Yard and 1 or 2 other schemes are hopefully going to deliver some of those. So that would be good. Clearly, we're actually now getting into the stage where a lot of this is being delivered. But I wonder if, going back, I'd be interested to know whether, there's only a couple of the schemes that have been fully delivered at the moment, but are we sort of going back to see what lessons are learned from? Obviously, Springvale's a small example, really, and perhaps, but have we sort of looked back as how well some of those schemes have worked, particularly with the passive house standards, and whether we may have got more gains than we thought in terms of savings on maintenance and repairs and all of the rest. But have we sort of learned any lessons from some of either the schemes that have been delivered or the construction that's taken place so far, to understand what works well and what doesn't work well?
Thank you, Councillor. So on your first point, in terms of family housing, it is something that we're alive to. I know our colleagues in housing are bringing forward a family housing strategy, actually, to try to push push us as much as possible, as well as influence the planning pipeline to deliver as much family housing as possible across all tenures. Because what we don't want is for the borough to just be transient. We want people to put down roots and thrive in the borough. And we can enable that through our own programme. So we can lead the way, and we are doing it. We're maximising that as far as possible. Certainly, that you won't see studios anywhere near any of our own developments, and it's something that we wouldn't necessarily approve in private developments either. So absolutely, it's 2-bed plus, but we don't put a sort of a 2-bed or 3-bed, but also person size. We want is a 3-bed 5 or 6 person rather than a 3-bed 4 person. Because does that really work? That's kind of the level that we're going into. In terms of lessons learned, it's probably a little bit early. Yes, we have got some lessons from Springvale, but as you say, it's a small scheme. It's largely worked quite well. But I think the real test comes when we complete our second phase of Ed City, because that's 108 units plus other facilities. And then this time next year, when the Hartop and Lannoy site is complete, that's 134, and that's our first passive house. So we will see quite a lot. So probably this time next year, we'll have a lot more lessons learned, for better, for worse, and we'll be happy to share that. But that's absolutely built into our 360 cycle, because we will be reporting on that post-completion too.
Thanks very much. No, that is very, very interesting. I think, sorry, also to sort of call out the fact that obviously Ed City, as you say, there's the integration of, and in a number of these schemes, the integration of new, genuinely affordable intermediate housing and other sort of benefits, such as, particularly the education benefits of building a new, as you say, there's the West Youth Zone, there's the Arc Swift, and everything else. And hopefully those are going to be great new facilities that benefit both people using some of that stuff, but also the wider community as well. So we certainly look forward to all of that. As a final comment, I would sort of note on this converting office space that I can see there are some, you sort of think that should be obvious, but I think the way that offices are built is very different to the way that homes are built. So actually being able to convert actual office space, which tends to have a sort of core and lifts and, sets of toilets and whatever, facilities for servicing an office floor, makes them quite difficult to convert as is, I guess, to actually sort of residential accommodation. But I guess there might be examples. It'd be interesting to know if there are examples, not now, where that has worked. But clearly, I guess it's more taking hold of that site and then using it for residential development rather than commercial development. Sorry, Councillor.
Chair, no, thank you. Excellent points. I was just going to add that actually a core part of the upstream London industrial strategy is actually also focusing on ways to create hubs, flexible office working spaces. So notwithstanding, thinking about the spaces that we do have and how they can be perhaps redesigned or reshaped to encourage that entrepreneurial spirit that we know is strong within the borough, but thinking about the spaces that exist and what modifications and adaptations can take place. So it may not necessarily mean converting that into a housing building, it's just taking advantage of that space and flexing it in some way. So to your point as well, Councillor Lang, with regards to the way that the world has evolved, the working world continues to evolve. It's about designing more co-working spaces that invite spaces for like hubs for people to come together and interact and mix with others, whatever that looks like. But that's also a key consideration that's part of Upstream London strategy too.
No, thank you very much. I think you've heard our comments about, and I think we've learned yet more about all of this. I think to sort of summarise, and I think we'll say this in whenever you come back next, probably later this year or maybe next year. Interested in the sort of lessons learned, the benefits of Passive House. Take on board the point that obviously we've only delivered a small number of schemes at the moment, and actually it will be more in perhaps 12 months' time that we'll understand a bit more about that. Interested as well to understand, given that we're now delivering some schemes as well, both the sort of, as well as lessons learned, the sort of impact that that's had on the communities, because clearly we've got some evidence perhaps from White City at the moment as to how well some of that has worked. Again, in 12 months' time, maybe we will know more about that. In particular, I think the evidence that Councillor Patel pointed to, which is in spending slightly more on the development for Passive House, it would be useful, in lessons learned in the future, would be to sort of check and evaluate whether the benefits that we expected at the beginning, such as energy bills being a lot lower for residents, and probably some of the maintenance and repairs costs potentially for the council being lower have sort of come to pass. Clearly, we probably don't have a critical mass that we can find from that evidence at the moment. The office space point is quite interesting as well. There's a very good episode in the last couple of years of the podcast 99% Invisible, which is an American podcast, which was all about this idea of converting office space and the difficulties of doing that due to the design issues between office and residential, but that's more of an aside. But I think thanks to all the committee for the comments there, and thank you very much for bringing this back. Very interested to see its development and the fact that these things have been delivered. Really keen to see even more about lessons learned, and I think we take on board all the points you're making in the presentation about the benefits of all of this scheme as a whole. So thank you for bringing it, and send our thanks to all of your colleagues who are working on this, particularly those who are working on the design and build, but all those who are engaging residents and making sure that their voices are heard within all of this this programme.
I will do. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. And just for members to know, if they haven't already, that the next meeting is on the 21st of July 2025, not 2024, as I may have said at the previous meeting in regard to this meeting. So I would like to thank everyone attending or watching tonight's meeting, and thank you for coming.